The Game Changers, Combating the Myth That Meat Equals Protein. A review by Panchula Ganeshan. Diet is controversial because it sits at the crux of so much of what makes us human. Family tradition, cultural heritage, religious beliefs, and ethics. What one eats reflects a mixture of beliefs, attitudes, values, and education, as well as economics. The influence of advertising is also ubiquitous, reinforcing a dominant narrative about human nutrition, all the while conveniently keeping the means of production out of sight. The idea that meat equals protein is one of the most persistent myths in society. The Game Changers is a documentary that combats this myth with a vitally charged argument for plant-based nutrition, featuring many credible experts to explain the science behind the diet and impressive plant-based athletes as examples. The documentary was directed by Oscar winner Louis Syhos and executive produced by James Cameron and a host of other Hollywood stars, notably Arnold Schwarzenegger. The narrative arc follows James Wilkes' intellectual discovery of plant-based nutrition. Wilkes in real life is an MMA, mixed martial arts fighter and combative trainer who grew up like most of his peers, thinking meat was rudimentary, to being big, strong, and dominating. His own research, however, led him to a sea change in perspective. While he was healing from serious surgeries to his knees, Wilkes began research into recovery and diet. What opened his mind to plant-based nutrition initially was the discovery that the Roman gladiators were shown by paleontologists to be predominantly vegetarian. Fabian Kahns, PhD, a forensic pathologist at Medical University of Vienna, was interviewed in Game Changers to help unpack the study of the gladiators' bones. Kahns explains, "We know different food sources give different amounts of strontium in the bones. High strontium levels are found in vegetarians, low strontium levels in carnivores. When they analyzed the bones of the gladiators, they found high levels of strontium. Kahns further explains that they found very high bone mineral density, which indicated intense training and high-quality diet to build up strong bones and strong muscles. This diet gave the gladiators a nickname, hordeari, which means beans and barley muncher. The dismantling of several related dietary myths unfolds from here. First up is showing where the idea originated that animal protein gives people energy. Wilkes traces this assumption back to an influential 19th century German chemist named Justus von Liebig, who hypothesized, as retold by Wilkes, that muscular energy came from animal protein and that vegetarians were incapable of prolonged exercise. Liebig's original published work is highlighted on the screen to show Wilkes isn't making this up. He later finds evidence that Liebig's beliefs were so widely accepted that they even inspired the USDA's first protein recommendations. By the time science proved this theory false, with the discovery that hard-working muscles run primarily on the carbohydrates found in plants, it was too late. Dr. James Loomis, a former team physician for 2 professional championship sports teams, addresses the idea that meat equals protein. He explains that all protein originates in plants and bioaccumulates in animals that graze on plants, which humans then eat. Environmentalists often point out that this inefficient energy conversion, which occurs by eating the animal for the protein that it got originally from plants, is the root of devastating impacts on the natural world. Game Changers, however, doesn't press this point, but rather stays laser-focused on addressing other assumptions related to plant-based nutrition, such as the idea that plant protein is inferior in quality to animal protein. This assumption is proved false. Proteins are strings of amino acids, explains Loomis, and there's some amino acids our bodies can't make. Those are the essential amino acids, so we have to get them from food. And one of the arguments about animal-based proteins being superior is that plant-based proteins aren't complete, so you're not going to get all the amino acids. And that's a fallacy as well. Citing on screen the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Wilkes found that every single plant contains all the essential amino acids in varying proportions. And when it comes to gaining strength and muscle mass, research comparing plant and animal protein has shown that as long as the proper amount of amino acids are consumed, the source is irrelevant. A subplot of the film is the troubling heart health of Wilkes' father in real life, which the producers use as a platform to showcase the negative impact of animal foods on the cardiovascular system. Two well-known heart specialists, Dr. Dean Ornish and Caldwell Esselstyn Jr., both weigh in on the ill effects of eating animal foods. Wilkes' father is soon cajoled into trying a plant-based diet, in consultation with Esselstyn Jr., after he suffered a heart attack. Ornish, who famously demonstrated that a plant-based diet could reverse the effects of coronary heart disease, recounts what happened in his original study. What we found is that in the first month, there was improvement in blood flow, and the heart began to pump blood more normally. After a year, even severely clogged coronary arteries became measurably less clogged, and even more improvement after 5 years. He explained further that the arteries in the randomized control group, whom were getting a modified animal protein diet with less red meat, more fish and chicken, got more clogged as time progressed. Game Changers moves on to reveal the forces working behind the scenes to keep animal foods like meat, eggs, and dairy in the average diet. They make a strong case. Wilkes points out the similarities between the tobacco industry and the meat and dairy industries, all which have funded their own scientific studies to boost the image of its products, but also suppress the evidence of their negative aspects. The producers avoid broaching the ugliness of factory farming and animal rights, which they could have, but rather set their sights on the propaganda of these industries. Companies reliant on the animal agriculture industry use advertisements featuring athletes to weld a mental correlation between animal products and peak athletics. Inside boxing rings and other sports arenas today, for instance, one will find Burger King, McDonald's, and other food company logos. Even Wilkes calls himself out, showing footage of him in a UFC fight, battling over a Burger King logo placed at the center. Wilkes discovered that Exponent Incorporated, an engineering and scientific consulting company, was hired by the tobacco industry roughly 50 years ago to produce studies denying a link between secondhand smoke and cancer. At the time, science had already determined cigarette smoking was a definite threat to one's health. It was a calculated attempt to confuse the public. Interestingly, Wilkes found this same company was later hired by the meat and dairy industry to produce evidence denying any causal link between animal foods and the increased risks of cancer and heart disease. The film leaves a strong impression that there has been a long-standing campaign of misinformation driven by the animal agriculture industry intended to maintain the status of its products. The shock value of these claims, although evidence-based and warranted, predictably generated a steady rumble of criticism from biased omnivores. Many critics argued that the film cherry-picked studies to support a single point of view and failed to represent animal protein fairly and comprehensively. John DeFore of The Hollywood Reporter, for instance, opined with a hint of sarcasm that The Game Changers was a thorough and well-assembled piece of dietary evangelism. Our reviewer for Men's Health magazine, Paul Kita, argued that there is a proper place for meat in the human diet and accused the film of either-or thinking. He writes, "Either you eat animal products and suffer the consequences, or avoid animal products and thrive," the movie argues. Assuming his readers all desire to keep eating meat, Kita suggests an alternative is simply eating more vegetables. This point was intended to be the hammer in his critique, yet it misses the mark. The Game Changers was produced to combat the myth that one cannot achieve peak athletic performance and nutrition without animal protein. The goal wasn't to present a robust, objective comparison contrast of an omnivorous diet versus a plant-based one. A documentary cannot do everything for everybody. It must have a focus. It is true that a plant-based diet requires self-education and diligence to meet one's dietary needs. Avoiding animal products alone doesn't make one healthy. Those adapting a plant-based diet need a source of beneficial bacteria for the gut, B12, essential fatty acids, iron, among other essential nutrients. With a nod to the film's detractors, the producers may have projected an oversimplified view of nutrition. Viewers and readers alike might keep in mind that the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics recognizes in its own position statement that appropriately planned vegetarian, including vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits for the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. These diets are appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, older adulthood, and for athletes. To some viewers' dismay, Game Changers strategically avoids the word vegan throughout. Some felt this was a sly way to mask a hidden agenda, thereby making it more approachable. This is a vegan propaganda film that won't say the name. This criticism is also unjustified. It was technically accurate for the producers to avoid conflating plant-based nutrition with veganism, as the latter implies an entire abstention from animal products in one's lifestyle choices. While not perfect in the observance, vegans generally strive to avoid leather, wool, honey, and down feathers, which come from fowl, in addition to meat, dairy, and eggs. The Game Changers overall projects great energy to the audience owing to the diversity and vibrancy of its featured athletes. Both male and female athletes appear, varied in age, race, and sport. Some include extreme long-distance marathoners, sprinters, Olympic weightlifters, Olympic speed cyclists, professional football players, bodybuilders, UFC fighters, firefighters, among others. This diverse selection is effective in showing the audience that plant-based athletes are not just skinny white people. Their glowing faces and remarkable athletic feats are inspiring. Altogether, it is a formidable task to combat the deeply entrenched assumptions about the superiority of animal protein, and Game Changers delivers a compelling counterpunch. The movie is not only visually appealing, but it also is well-paced, with a runtime of about an hour and a half. Originally released in 2019, The Game Changers currently maintains a solid 70% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a widely referenced film review site in America. The film can be viewed on Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube, and other platforms. Its own website, GameChangersMovie.com, is well organized and stocked with helpful information not included in the film, a robust fact page, plus healthy plant-based recipes and meal plans. I highly recommend this film to all people regardless of their dietary proclivities.